Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
The gentleman yields.
Mr. Speaker, in the First Amendment to our Constitution, the government shall not infringe on the citizen's right to freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. However, the Supreme Court has stated that the government may limit political speech and association, but it must be reasonable, non-discriminatory restrictions on election procedures, but that those restrictions must have an important regulatory interest, not just because it thinks it's a good idea. My question for the gentleman is, what exactly is the important regulatory interest that the government is advancing by suppressing this political speech and association?
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the question from my worthy friend and brother of the bar, the gentleman from Ottawa County, whose love of the Constitution is equal to mine. I would say this to the gentleman. He's correct in noting the court's ruling Burdeck versus Takish, 504 U.S. 428, that the strict scrutiny analysis is not applied in this kind of an exercise. Instead, a balancing approach is utilized where the character and magnitude of the asserted injury to the First Amendment is weighed against the justification put forward by the local government, in this case the town of Leesburg. And I would advise my friend that the town of Leesburg, like many jurisdictions in Northern Virginia, has a great number of people who work for the federal government and are covered by the Hatch Act. And we want to encourage these very active citizens to participate, if it's their desire, in a town elected office. I'd also advise my friend that if indeed provisions such as this one proposed, which is included in many town and city charters in our Commonwealth, is indeed facially unconstitutional, then legislation which was before the Privileged Elections Committee that was tabled most certainly would not have been tabled and would have been passed. Our Privileged Elections Committee had legislation up this year that would basically ban localities from disallowing registration or partisan balloting, and that was tabled. I would ask that the bill be engrossed and sent forward for further reading, and I do appreciate the gentleman's question.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for a question?
Beg your pardon?
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for another
Will
question?
the gentleman yield?
With pleasure.
Gentleman yields.
My question for the gentleman from Loudoun County. In Washington State Grange versus Washington State Republican Party, United States Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court specifically stated that, yes, it does not fall under a compelling state interest, but it falls under the important regulatory interest. And again, I ask the question, what is the important regulatory interest that the government is advancing by suppressing this speech?
And I would advise my friend from the Isle of Wight that the purpose behind this is to encourage as many citizens as possible to be able to be on the ballot for town elections, including those that are covered by the Hatch Act.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the bill.
The gentleman has the floor.
I certainly respect my friend's desire to be able to allow federal employees to be able to get on local elections, but two wrongs don't make a right. Whether I agree with the Hatch Act or not, I oppose this bill based upon simple principle, and that is the preservation of individual rights and liberties guaranteed by our Constitution. Under our constitutional republic, for the government to infringe on those individual rights and liberties, it must have good cause. And under suppression of political speech, the regulation must be reasonable, non-discriminatory, but it must have an important regulatory interest. I understand and can empathize with trying to get additional folks to run for office. I certainly do. But it's the principle. It's the principle of not eroding our constitutional freedoms one more step. I understand I may be the only person to vote against this little old city charter. But I ask each person of this House to vote no and not allow any further erosion of our constitutional freedoms, regardless of how small they may be. Thank you.